It's lights out, everybody, and welcome back to the Low Downforce podcast, the for-friend Formula One podcast. But you are stuck with a dynamic duo tonight. It is Josh and myself, Ben, which, huge spoiler alert, we're part of the we support teams who have double disqualified in 2025, unfortunately. So, club party of us. How you doing? How you feel?
Like, one of our teams already won a championship this year, and one of our teams next year is our year. So
next year is our
just
year.
Slightly differently. The race itself, I like races in America because they're on better time zones, except this one is still in the middle of the night. It's not as bad as in years past. Didn't it start at like 2 a.m. Eastern last year?
Yeah, so they bumped it up 2 hours earlier. Yeah. So it started at 11 p.m. for us because we're on the East Coast, but last two editions,
maybe it was
the first two editions, it was 1 a.m. to start. I've stayed up. I've watched all three of them live, for better or for worse. This one, I mean, we spoiled it a little bit. We're going to talk about it as kind of the main thing of this episode because it's all everybody's talking about. But McLaren, Lando Norris finishes P2 on track. Oscar Piastri finishes P5 on track, up to P4 with Kimi Antonelli's penalty. And then after the race, they're both disqualified because they've worn the plank underneath their car too much. It effectively means they've been running their car too low to the ground, which is a huge safety issue. We've seen, when you look up the videos from the 80s and 90s, you see Formula One cars literally catching air and flying off the track. That is because you lose all the downforce, you bottom out, and then all of a sudden you take off. That's why there's limits, but there's a plank underneath that can wear down a certain amount. Anything less than 9 millimeters is a problem. Both McLaren cars were checked after, as were the whole top 10. The McLarens were the only two to have run too low and were disqualified because of it, which I think the thing that pisses me off the most, and we'll talk more about why the double disqualification sucks, but is not as bad for some people as it is others. I fucked up my entire sleep schedule this weekend to watch this race. Felt really great about Lando performing really well at a track that McLaren historically has done terribly at. And then I go to bed all happy. I wake up in the morning and my Sunday is ruined because McLaren double DNF. J9 is posting happy gifs in the group chat, all of this stuff. You know how it be. But we're going to get into all that right off the bat, though. We always do our race rating. 1 out of 10, 0 out of 10, however you want to rate it. What did you feel about this edition of Las Vegas?
I'm going to give it a 7. I like this off-track drama. It's bringing the championship to a great point right at the end of the season because Lando had the chance to kind of just run away with it, shut the door. He couldn't seal the win, but make it pretty easy for himself in Qatar. And now Max Verstappen is tied on points with Oscar Piastri. They're both just 24 points behind Lando Norris with 2 races and a sprint to go. So if anyone's going to do it, I mean, Max is the guy to do it. And it has set up this improbable comeback for Max Verstappen. What an absolute story that would be, winning his 5th straight if he could do that Drivers' Championship. So I'm giving it a 7 just
on points. It would be the biggest
storylines. Yeah.
Yeah, it would be the biggest comeback in Formula One history in terms of
the actual points. On track. There were some good overtakes here and there, but it also wasn't anything wild.
That's kind of my thing. So rating the race, obviously, because I watched the race, took it all in, kind of put in my rating, went to bed, obviously gets work. The off-track stuff, I guess, tells the story, but on track didn't show that much. I went with a 4 out of 10, but I also think part of the criticism is the race direction. I thought the race direction was horrendous, maybe the worst it's been. Obviously, so now we know that it wasn't a fuel issue, but a plank wear issue. But the last 2 or 3 laps of the race, Lando Norris started losing 4 seconds a lap to Max Verstappen. And George Russell, who also had a problem with his car, was catching up on Lando. And not once did they cut to Lando to see, was it a brake issue? Was it a car issue or not? Obviously, now with the disqualifications, we now know it was a plank wear issue. Too little, too late to solve.
I got a little track take about that later, too.
Yeah, we'll get into it for sure. So I'm it's kind of eh. I do want to give a little shout out. If we were rating the qualifying session, that's an 11 out of 10. I know everybody talks about Monaco being the best qualifying session of the year, and I think that's true because Monaco is its own chaos. We've never had a session in Las Vegas in the rain, and already it's the coldest race of the year. So It's driving around on ice when it's rainy out. It was hard, low visibility, sliding and drifting through corners. I love the commentators did a good job pointing this out, is that qualifying session. I don't know how much you watched of it because it was late as well, but it proved that Formula One has the best drivers in the world. I mean, multiple times, multiple drivers
Certainly.
had the car sideways and then were able to keep it out of the wall. Alex Albon does crash during qualifying right before the pits, so he's able, even with a dangling front right tire, is able to coast into the pits. There's no red flag in this entire hour of like rainy, unfamiliar Vegas. It was very, very impressive and very entertaining. A, watching the times fall, and B, watching how talented these drivers were to keep pushing right on the edge of just absolutely destroying their cars.
Yeah, I almost went with a red flag in qualifying as my hot take going into this race, and I didn't. But I'm glad I didn't because, wow, that would have been crazy. Also, qualifying Ferrari is so bad in the rain. It's just classic Ferrari. Qualified horrible. Lewis Hamilton's, I guess, worst career starting position. Started last, and the worst by a Ferrari driver since like the early 2000s or something like that. It was really bad.
It is not a great year, but qualifying, of course, is only there to set us up for the Grand Prix where it all matters. Josh, I know you have the race recap for it. We hit the big story, but certainly some other talking points.
Yeah, just quick recap overall. Verstappen finished first, Russell second, Antonelli third after he had a 5-second penalty for a jump start at the beginning of the race. Leclerc fourth, Sainz fifth, Hadjar sixth, Hülkenberg seventh, Hamilton eighth, Ocon 9th, and Ollie Behrman 10th. Double Haas points right at the bottom there. But like I mentioned, Antonelli had his penalty. McLarens were double disqualified for plank wear. Alexander Albon did not finish. Gabriel Bortoleto did not finish, and Lance Stroll did not finish. Stroll was out on a lap 1 incident. Bortoleto finished 2 laps, but was out shortly after from his own incident.
So Stroll got punted by Bortoleto. So yeah. Bortoleto, I don't know if he locked his brakes. I don't know if he missed his brake point, but
I think he missed his brake point.
Bowling on turn 1. But worth noting, because he was out of the race so early, while the FIA was still investigating, he carries a 5-place grid penalty into the next Grand Prix because he could not serve any kind of penalty during this race. And so Albon, 5 cars not, I guess, classified at the end of it. I don't know how a disqualify gets marked, but certainly it feels. But I think maybe that's why I rated the race so lowly. It's like we had 3 DNFs, we had 2 DSQs, and for that much happening, I feel like not that much happened.
Yeah, I do feel bad for Albon because he had quietly a very nice race going. I feel like, but
until his pit crew forgot to replace his front wing.
Yeah, that would have been a big one.
Also, I guess worth noting, because I imagine we're not going to talk about it too much just because it's fringe, like you mentioned, but Alex Albon had no radio the entire race.
So yeah, I heard them mention that at the end, and I was so confused.
And I in hindsight, I can remember one lap where they're showing like the start-finish straight, and the Williams engineers are holding out boards, with information.
Old school style. So
definitely a race to forget for Alex Albon. But you mentioned Carlos Sainz all the way up in 5th, so
yeah,
that probably bumps him out more, knowing how many points were on the line. Also, while we're here,
their car looked awesome.
There were a lot of good-looking liveries. I thought the V-Carb looked too. But I do want to, while we're here, give a shout-out. Congrats, Dorian Penn, Formula One Academy. It was their last round. She won the Formula One Academy Championship. And I'm gonna preach Formula One Academy because we got to see them in Montreal. And it was really,
that was
really
like
fun.
Some of the best racing of the entire weekend in Montreal.
It shows the benefit of there's different teams, but it's a spec series. So they all have the same car. They can adjust very small things, but it means that it's the driver talent that is putting you way in front or way behind, but it means a lot of the pack is bunched together. You get some very rubbing is racing sometimes.
Very hectic.
We certainly saw some chaos, but I loved F1 Academy when we saw it. Their season is now concluded. Congrats. I mean, Dorian Penn, when we saw her, like she was a baller. Like she's Mercedes driver, so she's got it. But
that's a good shout out.
Yeah, and maybe a couple other shout outs coming here. we can hop right into our track takes, kind of what we learned from the weekend. Obviously, the huge storyline is McLaren's double disqualification. I'm sure it's going to come up more in the episode. But anything else you observed? Anything else that rubbed off on you from this weekend?
No, I was going to go straight into track take talking about McLaren.
Why not?
So you mentioned it earlier that they had told Lando at the end of the race, lift and coast, because clearly they knew there was an issue. He was going very slow. Why didn't they tell anything to Oscar Piastri? And maybe they just didn't show it on the TV at all, but I feel like I would have seen something online afterwards about it. Like they're in the same team.
So it's interesting.
If you give the chance to, is this making it fair because Lando had plank wear, so Oscar, you must have plank wear also, instead of letting Oscar maybe salvage it and be close to Lando? I've been saying all year that McLaren has been favoring Lando Norris because they had the car in a great place. Oscar Piastri was dominant, and then they kept tinkering with the car because Lando was unhappy with it. Now, clearly, Oscar isn't on board with it, but they're not going to do anything about it because it's too late in the season. And I feel like all year they've been favoring Lando Norris, and it started as Oscar was dominant. He felt with the car in the first half of the season, and they've just been pushing everything in Lando's direction, pretending that, we're doing this because it's fair, and we have two number one drivers. But I understand Lando should be the number one driver on paper. He's been with the team for much longer than Oscar, but they have been favoring him every which way they can. And I think it's an inside job.
I'm red flagging this big time. Not a huge surprise, but there's a lot to unpack there. You brought up a lot of things. From what I was reading today, because yes, we do research for this podcast. We want to inform our audience as opposed to just waffle entirely on here. Apparently, one, we didn't hear a lot of Oscar radio, but McLaren was trying to be as cryptic as possible so that
that's fair.
So that you don't get George Russell pushing a little more to pass Lando, or you don't get Charles, who was kind of on the heels of
you don't
Oscar
get
the whole
GP
race.
Coming on the radio to Max Verstappen saying Lando's coming after you now. They said word for word.
Well, GP said they're coming after you, but Lando is saving in this corner, this corner, this corner, and this corner, which are the ones where you bottom out the most. It's one of those things where, and this is something I learned today, I didn't realize, they can calculate expected plank wear, but they can't directly measure it during the race. So, I mean, we're talking about Oscar, because he was chasing Kimi and was really driving much harder the back half of the race, wore his plank more. He was 0.26 millimeters below the requirement. But again, he was the more egregious. We're talking a quarter of a millimeter. Yeah. Like Lando was 0.1 millimeters. Like it's, I mean, obviously in precision world, that's a lot of room. But if you weren't expecting it, like I was running it through my head, like after the race or Sunday morning and today, is once you've set up the car like that, other than like lifting and coasting to like completely ruin your race,
not much you can do.
Like, I don't know how much would Lando's car have worn twice as much if he didn't lift the last 3 laps? Was he, did he ever really have a chance? I don't know. But the one thing to kind of get to the back half of what you said is I think it looks bad as it does for Oscar, because the beginning of the season, when McLaren was so dominant, if Oscar was the better driver, Lando was finishing second. And because they were so far ahead, they wrapped up the constructors, which ultimately is what McLaren has said they wanted more. Once other teams started to catch up after they had switched off, because Max was doing better, because Mercedes was doing a little better, is even if the McLarens were neck and neck, if Lando slightly got the edge, there could be 2 cars in between him and Oscar. And so the losses seem worse. But I was curious because I was like, did Lando figure something out? We know Oscar struggled on the back half of last year because it's low grip circuits, because it's tracks in the Americas that he's not as familiar with because the feeder series don't race there. Is Oscar Piastri has now gone 6 races without a podium. Lando has not done that in over 3 years. So when we talk about like consistency, don't get me wrong, Oscar was beating Lando.
Spoken like a true Lando fan.
Hey, I'm not hiding it. But it is interesting when you talk about, what's the difference here and there is Lando's bad weekends were still P2s, P3s at the beginning of the season. Now their bad weekends are P5s, P6s for Oscar, things like that. And so Lando's got by far the most podiums. I was looking all the different scenarios when we get to Qatar next weekend, the second leg of the doubleheader is Lando's first chance to win the championship. Is the points equations is Lando is so far ahead of everybody else in P2 finishes that if he wins Qatar, then more than likely he's going to win the championship outright. But if in some scenario he doesn't, he does terribly in the sprint, whatever, is nobody can have more wins than him on the season, which means then the next tiebreaker would be second place.
Second place.
So it's that consistency that's going to pay out for him in a big way. But
that would be crazy if it came down to the second tiebreaker.
I know, this is the business end of the season. Somebody did the math on the subreddit that was like, this is the exact scenario where all three drivers can be tied on race wins and points going into the final race.
That would be unreal.
It would be, at that point, you got to check if Michael Massey is on the other end of the phone. But
I want to see it happen.
We will certainly see. You don't have to wait long, fortunately. But getting into my track take, believe it or not, after 3 editions, Vegas is not only a good race, but it is one of the more important races on the calendar because it is consistently one of, if not the coldest race of the year. It gives the engineers and the strategy teams a lot of problems. And the other part of it is this unique layout, this nearly 2-kilometer straight down the strip combined with temperatures. You've got engineers trying to figure out tire graining issues, getting heat in tires during qualifying. You get a lot of sliding, which again goes into that tire management. We saw McLaren, for all of their swings and misses and mismanagements this year, they've been a dominant team. They've brought themselves back to the front, and yet they have a huge error strategically running the car too low. I think there's good racing tracks in terms of some of the European classics. It's really fun to see cars. I'm not talking about overtakes here, but you're talking about the same kind of, medium speed corners or high speed corner characteristics. Vegas not only presents a unique track layout, but the temperature issue makes it so that it separates it from NASCAR is what I would say, where it's oval here, oval there. You have to prepare almost a totally different car when you go to Monaco or when you go to Las Vegas. And that's one, the drivers have to perform, but it shows the team sport that is Formula One. We've heard stories of Max's sim drivers pulling 12-hour all-nighters trying to figure out the setup of a car last minute. You want that. You want it to be a challenge. You want these wins to mean something that, you were the best driver, the best team on the day. And I think Vegas really contributes to that.
I'm going to yellow flag that because I think Formula One is a sport where every track is different. Every track presents their own challenges. The weather can be unpredictable, all sorts of things. And I think also Vegas benefits from being at the end of the calendar. Whereas if you put this race in May or June, it's going to be 110 degrees. It's the exact opposite. And part of me would like to see that to some extent, just to see how different Vegas is as a race.
I think you already have that with Saudi Arabia. You have street tracks in the heat at night. True. I mean, it's not a street track, but we're going to Qatar and then Abu Dhabi, the last 2 races, which are at night
be warm
because they'd be so hot. I think the cold is a big factor.
I think it kind of just plays into Formula One as a whole. Every track is so unique, and yes, tracks are similar to each other, but so I get your point. It is cool engineering team sport, but also I think it just happens to be the scenario of Vegas itself, and that it's not. It is special because it is unique like that, but it is not unique.
Even though all the drivers hate it.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
But it does look really nice at night. Like the with the sphere in the background, it looks cool.
I don't know at what point it's no longer luck though, where I've thought all 3 races were worth watching. By no means was this the worst race of the year. I think we talked about this last year, maybe earlier this year. I think Vegas is a more interesting weekend layout than Miami is.
Yep, totally agreed.
And so And I mean, Formula One probably agrees too because they pumped all the money into kind of
building
hosting
their own paddock.
the race. But it was a crazy weekend. It was better for some than it was for others. We always go into our tops and our flops. Maybe you're going to go McLaren. I feel like that's the one that's like we've beaten the bush already. Obviously, that's the huge talking point, the disqualification. So we'll see what you've gone with. But we're going to start with our tops. We're going to shout out some people for sure. So Josh, kicking it back to you. Who was your standout this weekend?
I have to go Kimi Antonelli. What an absolute race. The jump start, like it was such a small thing. I don't even know if he gained any advantage. He hadn't even hit the gas. Like his car was just rolling forward.
There's a slight downhill apparently. So but I don't know what happened to Charles Leclerc in the last couple laps, but he fell out of the 5-second penalty window. So it wound up not hurting Kimi at all. We just came off of two like P2s in sprint.
Yeah.
This is probably Kimi's best performance though. I'm totally on board with you.
Yeah, he pitted to hard tires during the virtual safety car from that original lap 1 incident and went the entire race on one set of hards with the penalty and just never ended up needing to serve it until adding the time on at the end. And what a crazy drive from him. And got a little lucky with the McLarens, but getting a podium out of nowhere. I do wish we had seen Kimi on the podium in Vegas because he's not of drinking age in the United States. All the other countries, it's a lower drinking age. But I wanted to see what they would do with the champagne and like a kid that is not old enough to consume it.
The old sparkling pear juice,
Exactly.
But he was the top that I wrote down in my notes. It was stunning. He went 48 of the 50 laps on the same set of tires. Even though the McLarens get disqualified, the flow of the race totally changes if Oscar passes Kimi. And so Kimi defends Oscar, who is then defending Charles. So there's a small DRS train, but you've got two much more veteran, not much more, but veteran, very talented drivers chasing him down. But the other part of it too that makes it even more valuable than, just Kimi held position well is we found out a third into the race that George Russell was having a steering problem that he also had in qualifying. He was not competitive in terms of going forward. Lando passed him easily. Max Verstappen never really...
George kind of let him pass, but that's a different conversation.
But because he had the steering issue, he tried to fight Max. The steering issue came about, but George was losing time. And again, we don't know about the potential disqualification at this point, but very likely Oscar can go and catch George. Very likely Charles can go and catch George. So not only is it a great drive for Kimi himself, but played the team game incredibly, incredibly well too. Speaking of team games, I'm giving my top to Haas, who, believe it or not, is probably the biggest gainer of the double disqualification from McLaren.
Yeah.
So everybody's talking about, what does this double disqualification mean for the championship, for Lando, for Oscar, for Max, for all of that? Haas, because of two cars being disqualified, move not just into the points, but into double points, picking up P9 and P10, 3 points, which moves them ahead of Aston Martin by 1 point for P7 in the Constructors' Championship. So I was debating, do I call it a flop for Aston Martin? I think it's more of a top for Haas. It's a tricky track. We've talked about that. Qualifying was incredibly difficult. Haas stuck with it. And even when it didn't seem on the cards, just missing out on points by both cars. This is why you race on Sundays. This is why you play the game. Haas does move into the points, and that could be $10 million worth of points right there if it winds up holding for the last two races of the season.
Yeah, Haas, they scored 58 points all of last season, and with this, they have 73 points on the season. So they've had a great season overall. I feel like a 7th place finish, I feel like they were projected to maybe be one of the worst teams, like a back marker. And really, Alpine is the only back marker. Like, usually you have a few, I feel like, fighting to be the worst team. And I feel like in the past few years, Haas has been in that conversation, but they've had an incredible season. And who would have thought that 3 points is such a big difference? But in the midfield, that makes a huge difference.
I mean, Hülkenberg being promoted from 10th to 8th, picking up a couple more there. Sauber is just behind Aston Martin now too. And it's funny, I think back, I want to say it was around Canada time, somewhere around there in the season. So first, third, getting close to maybe first half. I think one of my track takes was, oh, Williams is going to make it to 100 points. And people were like, oh, I don't know, maybe. There's a legitimate chance, depending on how they perform. If they perform well, VCarb could also make it over that 100-point hump, which would mean 6 teams over 100 points. I don't know when the last time that's happened. We can certainly do a little quick research off the rip right now, but we've talked about it before. Commentators have talked about it. This is one of the most competitive seasons. Alpine last with 22 points is
from the team
most
standpoint,
points,
yeah.
but it's the most points last place has ever had. Everybody else is over 60. We're now a chance for VCarb to get over that 100 mark as well. Again, championship has been great, but it's also, to me, what's defined this year is how competitive the whole grid is, other than Alpine, of course. But that there's, on any race day, there's a P8, a P10, a P7 that's making a huge difference. Again, potentially millions of dollars difference.
Yeah, I feel like McLaren has kind of been out in front dominant all year, but the midfield teams are stealing points off of the Mercedes, Red Bull, and Ferrari. Because usually it is like a battle at the top between a few teams, and McLaren has just gotten all the points they can pretty much. And it's that second tier of, I hate to say that those 3 teams are second tier because they're all obviously like competitive. Well, Ferrari's not, but you know what I mean? And that's where all the midfield's stealing from.
It would have been tough to replicate last year where we had seven different winners. That was really awesome to see. This has been a nice complement to that, where we're not necessarily seeing as many winners, but we've gotten the Hulkenberg podium. We've gotten Sainz and a Williams podium. We've gotten some great midfield storylines that I think elevate Formula One above just the titans, if you will, of the sport. But not everybody can be a titan. There are some people who did not perform well enough this weekend to achieve titan status or anywhere close. That brings us to our flops. Josh, who bummed you out?
Ferrari did. Ferrari always bums me out, and it's specifically qualifying. This car, for whatever reason, is horrible in the rain. Ferrari's always horrible in the rain. Charles qualified 9th, and Lewis qualified 19th. And the race, like, given that start, like finishing 4th and 8th is not all that bad. But really, you finished 6th and 10th, which, like, without the disqualification. So it's just not good at all. Leclerc felt like he was having a great race and probably could have / should have been higher. And like we said, he was just off of Antonelli's penalty, like jumping that spot for 3rd. And Leclerc's had plenty of podiums this year. He's done pretty well. And Lewis made his way up the field during the race, but it's not even their fault. Like, the car is just not good.
They're moving forward a lot because they're starting not where
so far, yeah.
But I mean, minus Kimi Antonelli's defense, there's a legitimate chance Charles could have been P2 with the disqualification, things like that. So I don't think it was the worst. We talked a little bit about Gabriel Bortoleto. He's now crashed in 3 straight races, but I think my flop, weirdly enough, we've talked about McLaren a lot. I'm going Oscar Piastri specifically. And I think that the difficulty is, and I think this is why as a Lando Norris fan, the disqualification sucks, but it doesn't stress me out as much as I thought it would once I thought about it a little bit, is, okay, disqualification. Lando was going to be ahead 30 points in the championship. He's now ahead 24 points in the championship. Lando got really lucky in that that's the exact amount of points that Max is back now too. So he didn't actually lose any of his lead with the double disqualification. But I think that is why Oscar Piastri is the flop to me, is this point of the season, with everybody's respective form, Lando doesn't need to win races anymore. This part of the season, it's not about, not letting the championship balloon out. It is Oscar has to be making inroads. Max as well, which obviously he did, but Oscar has to be making inroads on Lando. And believe it or not, as much as it sucks for the drivers, it's not the driver's job to set the ride height. And so that's team error. But given that, I mean, Lando still grabbed pole. Would he have without the lower ride height? Maybe, maybe not. We won't know. But on track, Lando maximized his race. I think I had said it. I think a lot of us had talked about it, especially coming in. I think McLaren before the disqualification performed higher than we were all expecting because it's been a bogey track for them. I think everybody was like, if Max is near the front of the grid, he's going to be winning this race just because he needs to, because the track suits him better, all that stuff. So even though Lando with the weird start, he maximizes his weekend. Oscar Piastri not only is not performing as well on track, but before he knows anything about this disqualification, he's stuck behind Kimi Antonelli for the entire race. He actually makes a mistake earlier in the race. He tries to push Isaac Hadjar so hard that a lap later, Charles Leclerc winds up passing him just before the pit stops. So even though, okay, Oscar didn't lose any ground in the championship, we're past that point. He has to be gaining ground in the championship. Now Lando's at the point, whether it's Max, whether it's Oscar, Lando can finish third in the sprint and both Grand Prix remaining and still win the championship by 2 points. So a week ago, we were talking, he just has to finish second. Now it's third. So it's clearly not good enough. Oscar's slide continues. Again, I mentioned the stat earlier that now 6 straight races without a podium is a longer stretch than Lando's had in years. So he's got to find it. Even if he does find it, it's out of his control a little bit. If Lando stays consistent, he just won't be able to close this championship gap. But we have our own championship. I'm bummed out because this double DSQ prevented my hot take from coming in. But it meant I predicted the podium exactly correctly. So it's a net negative 1 point for me, but I feel good that I got the podium right.
I guess that's true. I don't know how many times this season somebody's got all 3 of the podium.
I can't say I thought it was going to come in once Kimi Antonelli qualified P17, but I'll take it.
Next year, I think if you nail all 3 in the podium, you should get bonus points because it just does not happen very often. But you got your 3 points there. Nobody predicted. I predicted pole. Matt predicted pole of Lando. Nobody got P10. You were the only one to get P3 with Antonelli. Both you and J9 got Russell in P2, and all 4 of us got Verstappen. Lots of points all around. I had gotten my hot take of McLaren 6 less points than Mercedes because McLaren got 0 points.
Nil
Mercedes got all the points except for the ones that everyone else got. And Matt said a driver from outside the top 10 finishes top 5. Kimi Antonelli right there. So that was good. So with that, I am still in the lead. Now I have 49 points. I had 5 this week. Matt also had 5 this week, staying right behind me at 46. J9 in third has 36 points. Only got 2 this week. She was the worst one. And you got 3 because of your podium, 35 points.
How far? Oh, so I'm 1 behind
You're 1 point off. So if you had bonus points there, maybe...
You know what? Maybe I'm just one of the midfield teams that I just need that 10 million extra bucks. I just need finishing the third instead of fourth.
Last.
It means a whole lot. We will certainly see. Obviously, we're getting to the very, very business end of the 2025 season. We have 2 race weekends to go, 3 races because next race is in Qatar and is a sprint weekend. So we get a little more racing action. Just for full clarity, because it's what everybody's locked into right now, Lando Norris leads the championship on 390 points. Max Verstappen, with the win and the McLaren double disqualification, is now tied with Oscar at 366 points, 24 points behind Lando Norris. Oscar Piastri does still hold the tiebreaker as it currently stands, but Qatar, our next race, is the first chance Lando has to win the championship. If he finishes the weekend either 26 points or more ahead of everybody else, he wins. If he wins Qatar, the Grand Prix that is, on 25 points ahead of everybody else, that will also clinch the championship for him. So you definitely want to tune in. It is so exciting. It is so meaningful. And we're either going to walk away with potentially a championship winner this weekend, or the exact opposite, where 3 drivers are all still in play going into the season finale. If you've ever heard about 2021 in Formula One in Abu Dhabi, chaos can happen if you let it go down to the wire. Of course, we will be back with an episode before Qatar to get you all ready for it, what to watch as the headlines come rolling in. But until then, everybody, stay speedy. Goodbye.